This is a Grab the Mic webinar from the Beam Exchange. My name is Mike Albu. I look after the Beam Exchange along with my colleague Isabel. And we run these webinars to exchange lessons and experience and knowledge about applications of the market systems development approach. And so today I'm very pleased to be inviting three speakers to talk about the program called Making Markets Work for the Chars, M4C in Bangladesh. In a moment, the first speaker, Helal Hussain, who's the country director for Swisscontact in Bangladesh, who implemented this program, will have a word and probably maybe explain what we mean by a chars for those of us who are not familiar with Bangladesh. We also have Zinia Rashid, who is the program manager from the Swiss embassy in Dhaka, which funded this program very generously over 10 years now. And thirdly, we have my colleague, DCD colleague, Harald Bekkers, who's the founder and CEO of Opportunities Unlimited and took on an important role in capturing the lessons from M4C in its final phase. So I'm going to let these guys talk for about half an hour, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So as I said, use the Q&A box for those questions, and look forward to speaking to you again after you've heard from Helal, Zinia, and Harald. But here we go. Helal, why don't you start for us, please?
Thank you, Mike, and good evening from Dhaka to everyone who's joined. I'm Helal Hussain, the country director at Swisscontact Bangladesh, and really my honor to welcome you to this Beam Exchange webinar. And as MSD practitioners, we are here today to explore how a systemic approach can be institutionalized for a lasting impact. For the last 25 years or so, Swisscontact has been working in Bangladesh to drive inclusive economic growth through its skills development and enterprise promotion projects. And MSD approach has always been an integral part of all our projects. And among these projects, Making Markets Work for the Chars stands out as a model for sustainable and scalable impact. And for those who are not familiar with the word chars, so these are riverine islands that emerge from river bodies when the water level falls, and they're really remote in terms of locations. And since 2012, with funding from the Embassy of Switzerland and in collaboration with the government of Bangladesh, the M4C project has transformed the lives of over 145,000 households, which live in remote flood-prone areas, but they hold significant agricultural potential. But at the same time, they have been very disconnected from the mainstream markets. So M4C has been working to bridge this disconnect by improving the access to input and output markets and financial services and production knowledge, but at the same time strengthening the public-private partnerships to create lasting economic opportunities for the char dwellers and enhancing their resilience through its interventions. A key focus of the M4C's last phase has been ensuring its long-term sustainability, and this has been achieved through the Chars Development Research Centre, which is established under the Rural Development Academy in Bangladesh. And going forward, CDRC will serve as a permanent hub for research, advocacy, and capacity building, ensuring that M4C's work continue beyond its project's lifespan. So as we conclude M4C, its legacy is not just a project, but we are leaving behind a system that will continue to evolve. And it will continue to evolve through all the collaboration that we've made with the government agencies, private sector actors, financial institutes, and they will continue to unlock the economic potential of the chars that we've worked with. So on behalf of Swisscontact, I really want to extend my sincere gratitude to the Embassy of Switzerland, and particularly to Zinia, who's here with us in the panel, for their support and guidance throughout the M4C's journey. And I also want to thank Beam Exchange, Mike and Isabel, for hosting this important webinar. and looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helal. That was very great introduction. I think we're going to go now to Zinia at the Embassy of Switzerland.
Thank you, dear Mike, and good evening to everyone in this webinar. So I'm Zinia. So I'm working right now at the Embassy of Switzerland in Bangladesh, and my specialization is climate adaptive economic development. Today, I'm going to briefly talk or present our anchoring experience of the systemic development that has been observed in the Market for Char project. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
There's something all of a sudden not working very well. There we are.
Thank you. Well, as we know, that Bangladesh, we have rising inequality in income and wealth, and that is why poverty is getting concentrated in the hard-to-reach areas, such as chores. So when we say chore, this means it is a Bengali vocabulary, and it means riverine islands in the middle of big rivers. So those chore areas are hard-to-reach locations and remotely placed and physically disconnected from the mainland. And that communication going to chore and coming back is only possible by the river transports, of course, like boats, engine boats, and others. So therefore, chores are very prone to flood, river erosion throughout the season or seasonally. So people who lives in the chore, who are the chore dwellers, therefore they have the very limited livelihoods options. Their main livelihood choices are only subsistence farming, mainly in the crop and livestock sector. So they work as seasonal labor or a subsistence agricultural practices, and that is why chores are very much prone to the poverty, and those chore areas are called the extreme poverty pockets of Bangladesh. The M4C project actually worked in the northwestern regional chores, where an approximate 3 million chore dwellers live, and these chore dwellers are always forced to migrate to several other areas within their lifetime because of the climate change and natural hazards. And that actually has a bigger impact. They lose their homestead, they lose their farming lands in this whole process. That is why it has an important bearing on their livelihoods. Therefore, Chor are extremely poor people living there. And if we talk about the public and private service delivery front, the geographic isolation of the Chor results in very poor access to markets and services. And that is why fewer economic activities and lower output is there. And the situation is always further exacerbated by the flood, river erosion, drought. So that is why non-existent market infrastructure, limited information and understanding of the market actors and investors about the economic potential in the chores and the high risks altogether make chores challenging for public and private investment. As a result, chore dwellers who are living there are not only poor, but also they lead an extremely vulnerable life with limited choices of livelihood, along with the fewer opportunities to sustainably lift themselves out of poverty. Now, Switzerland, when we collaborated with the government of Bangladesh, we designed the M4C project to promote a comprehensive intervention in the market system to strengthen the livelihood options and reduce vulnerability of extreme poor people in a sustainable way. M4C Market for Char project was incepted in 2012, and we have introduced a market-driven solution to the char farming households, and that was only focusing on agriculture and livestock as commercially viable capitals. So all in all, M4C objective were in 4 layers, I would say. So first, the overall objective, the goal was improve livelihood capitals, and it means that improving relationship and linkages of the market actors, like financial capital improve, social capital improve, and then increasing access to sustainable financial products for char farmers and SMEs, which is broadly financial capital, and motivating public agencies to invest in infrastructure development in the chars. So physical capital leading to improved access to market facilities and healthcare, such as, so this kind of improving the human capital angle M4C has. And last but not the least is improving the disaster risk reduction angle and environmentally sustainable cropping practices for the chars. And it has, of course, improved the natural capital, contributing to better financial capital and physical capital as well. Next slide, please. So when Switzerland collaborated with Bangladesh government, and from the very beginning of this project, the bilateral relationship partnership was to support the country to a more inclusive and balanced regional growth. So chars, we wanted through M4C, we wanted to test how the inequality could be reduced, and partnership with the government actually eradicating the extreme poverty as the core development agenda for government as well, in particularly which are economically lagging behind, like the char. So Switzerland and Bangladesh, we had the joint effort to improving the agricultural productivity and diversification, so that replicating the success of leveraging private investment. What we have achieved in terms of M4C goals and objective, with M4C advisory support, technical assistance and cost sharing was the instrumental with the national companies and private sector actors. So including the small local traders, big national players like input company, agro traders. So they have expanded their business, both in terms of the sales and procurement in the chars. And beyond sales, M4C project partners, agro input companies have not only adapted and expanded, but also set some examples for competitions to enter into the market. Hence, non-partner companies also entering chars with their business portfolios. And we would say that in terms of the achievement, char dwellers also have accumulated greater financial output in terms of their increased production, better market access and profit, and greater access to financial services. Because of the better knowledge, information, know-how, they have better coping capacity now against shocks as well as environmental hazards. And therefore, subsistence agriculture has been evolved into the commercial agriculture with the increased reinvestment capacity of the char dwellers. And by understanding the systemic change approach in M4C model, Bangladesh government has increased their contribution to M4C pot, and it has improved. I mean, the trajectory is from 16% to 25% using the development fund, which is remarkable step to promote this approach. And last but not the least, a successful internalization and anchoring of M4C approach. This project provided institutional capacity building to support the Char Development and Research Centre, in short CDRC, which is a dedicated wing within the government. And that the CDRC, the capacity building of CDRC was actually aimed to leverage public and private investments for Char 11 development. Next slide, please. So at a macro level, if we see that M4C has been anchored through CDRC, this public institution will remain as a champion and lead facilitator for the chars related development issues. So they will continue influencing the policy discussion and direct more resources to the char. Also, M4C has created evidence of systemic change in working locations. A significant number of char farming people, trader, entrepreneurs have adopted sustainable livelihood opportunities and reduced their vulnerabilities. Now, the local and national private companies will extend their markets in the untapped char locations. The third is the exit strategy, and one of the exit strategy of M4C is the private sector routes. All partner companies, enterprises, and financial service providers have understood by using the M4C model that their business performance indicators are established for doing the business in the char and the continuity of the business. And those indicators are essential for sustaining their operations in the char. The fourth part is the financial inclusion. So M4C partnered with microfinance NGOs, fintech solution providers, social enterprises, and formal commercial banks. So M4C has been successful in this inclusive finance thematic pillar, that it could bring the successfully bring the introducing enterprising loans and customized seasonal loan for the crop and livestock farmers. And extension of regular microcredit services also happened into the chars. And the fifth angle is climate resilience. And M4C applied, as I said before, environmental sustainability as the cross-cut theme in M4C. And it addressed the disaster risk reduction issues. So M4C provided improved knowledge to the all stakeholders on DRR. What is the climate smart cultivation? And what are the post-harvest practices by ensuring the environmental preservation? So that ultimately have improved the disaster preparedness by the char people across all the market actors and increased resilience of the relevant market system actors. So I will stop here, and I'm sure any question or any kind of clarity we can elaborate at the later part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Zinia. Great. Let's move over to you, Harald.
All right. Oh, thank you. And let me take you a bit further into the chores. You saw already a picture from above. This is how it looks like on the ground, so to speak. It has been referred to already, so I won't say much. But so these are really, this is new land formed in the middle of rivers, very difficult to access. Some chores are relatively permanent, some chores flood. Sometimes some chores really flood every season. So for people who are very poor, this offers an opportunity to really start a new life, maybe when they lost land somewhere else. But it's certainly not easy to live in the chores. And so historically, it has been a place to go to if you're landless, or and well, you need to find a way to do something new. Because of these disconnections, it's very difficult to get there. That means markets in the chores also not very well developed. So people have land, sometimes more land than the average small farmer would have on the Bangladeshi mainland. But the question is how to do something with that land and to turn it into a livelihood. Initially, and when we sort of did a stock take of lessons learned from the M4C program, which has, as I think I saw, had run for 12 years. People still remember the first program that actually paid attention to the chores. That was the Chores Livelihoods Program, CLP. And from a systemic point of view, we would qualify that as a livelihoods program, heavily involved in direct asset transfers, such as just giving cows to farmers to, as a means to start a farm. Still remember for the fact that we're the first to actually pay attention to the chores, and you recognize its uniqueness. But also, I think, thankfully, when I was working in Catalyst, FCDO, SEC recognized that you could do more with the chores. That meant that initially Catalyst was also asked to expand its activity to include some of the chore areas. And after something like a successful pilot, that even became an independent program that followed up from Catalyst and really focused on the chores, and that became M4C. And I think in this presentation that I'm going to share now, you will see how relevant that systemic approach is to areas in which systems are weak. Sometimes I say the weaker the systems are in an area, the more you need a systems approach to bring those systems to life. All right, so in a abstract manner, this is what we, this is the situation, right? If you sort of analyze it from a systems point of view. This is the ideal that you would want to work towards. This is what people call the helicopter lens in terms of how a system should look like. You have various supply chains bring all kinds of relevant production inputs into an area. You have also business services being sort of becoming accessible in an area through other types of supply chains, right? Banks with regional offices and local agents. You have business, the services, the more public service that create a business enabling environment are also active in promoting that sort of easier way of doing sort of commerce. And if all these factors come together, then it's also relatively easier to produce a productive product that has a certain value and you can sell it off into the right market. So this is what every kind of system program in abstract terms wants to strive towards to achieve. Now, how is this situation in the chores, which we have started to describe as relatively isolated? And maybe just to, I always forget this one step, but in terms of those three arrows in a supply chain, we tend to make a distinction between sort of the more national companies, national agencies, regional representatives or regional companies, and the last mile, which really tends to interface directly with the people that we try to reach. Okay, so how does this picture look like in the chores? Obviously very different, far from this sort of ideal picture. As I said, as people start to refer to the fact this last mile is virtually absent. These are farmers on land, but there is no electricity, there's no police station, there is no healthcare services, there is no agro retailer, there is et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? These are people living more or less on their own, at least in the beginnings. Some of those regional companies that sort of are, would be in physical closer to a chore and hence would be more better understanding chores may also not be present. And what remains, and that was one of the striking things that came back in all the interviews that we did, national companies, national agencies, sometimes even regional companies, people do not know the chores. This is really land, beyond the water, somewhere in the distance. People have all kinds of questions on whether or not you actually should consider doing something there. So a lot of questions, essentially preventing people maybe from actually starting to explore or invest or do something that sort of makes the system more coherent and work better. So how do you then start to, so what do you do then to, what is needed, I guess, to address those gaps? Now, first, maybe a bit of an overview of the kinds of things that M4C has been doing over the 12 years. Its strategy has been sort of slow, more or less, it's sort of shifting in time, but I think that's not so relevant for this current discussion. I think the first thing that should stand out, if you sort of read slowly through this list, is a very diverse range of things that had to happen to connect the chores better to the mainland. You have to sometimes start with sort of installing pontoons, because if you need to transfer things by boat, but the boat can't moor, that's the first hurdle to get across. That means you need to figure out what kind of mooring dock pontoon station can work. And then, of course, you need, in this case, a public institution to start building these things. If you're far connected from the mainland, then it's very inconvenient to having to travel to the mainland time and again to buy everything. So what you ideally have is, for instance, you support nurseries to make sure that people at least can buy seedlings of the right crop, the right varieties that grow in the circumstances close to you. Same thing, same logic applies to hatchery. Livestock is historically very important for the chores. That means you need artificial insemination services to make sure that sort of you can breed. So all these things have been sort of been building up in time. A very notable one, you have heard many stories about, I think, input retailers in Bangladesh, but also here in the chores of particular relevance, given the fact that you move from a scenario where virtually very few input retailers were available to sort of creating a much bigger density so that, again, the people can access those kind of services close to where they live. What we're going to show you in that in a bit more detail on the next slide. Also, an additional investments, not only just retailers selling inputs, but sort of one-stop shop solutions where you can go to acquire inputs, for instance, on credit, right? If you're a very poor farmer, you typically are very cash strapped at the beginning of the agricultural cycle. So it really helps a lot if you can go to a place where people know you. And initially you can get your inputs on credit, you apply them, and then once you harvest and you have money in your pocket, then you repay for what the products that you use. So investments in that area. More technical innovations, low-cost solar power irrigation. The key word here is mobile. If chores flood, you don't want to have something installed that can't be moved if the water rises. So you need to adapt technology to make it suitable to be functional in a chore environment. And the same applies to storage facilities. We'll show that in more details in the 2 slides down. Storage, very important to preserve things, but in the chores you don't only need you need storage that you can sort of break down and move if the water gets too high. So lots of things have been put in place over the years to form a system. The first list of things I listed were really these last mile actors. Those again are connected to larger companies, such as the ones you see listed below, Petrochem, etc., 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 so that you really start to see real supply chains emerge. Now let's go into a bit of detail in terms of how that then works. The first example probably is a little bit more conventional, in the sense that here there is a company in Bangladesh called iFarmer. It's a social enterprise, so it's not a standard agro input business that just wants to sell inputs. It has a much stronger development objective. They have a different business model. They want to sort of sell a bundle of services to farmers, with the notion that if farmers have access to the right kind of inputs at the right time, in the right volume, and with the right kind of advice in terms of how to use them, then you make farmers more productive. And if you make them more productive, they can also are in a much better position to pay for all those inputs. So in other words, if you allow people to access those inputs up front, and you make sort of iFarmer centers available near to them where you can access those. You can go to an iFarmer center to get extra information. There's another bit of information coming in through SMS service. If you establish that kind of infrastructure, you make farmers more productive, and it's highly relevant again in an environment where people are relatively poor and hence might otherwise be cash strapped. So they have been rolling this kind of model out in other areas of Bangladesh, but it's also very suitable for the chores. And M4C has been working with them to roll this out in chore areas. And these are the initial, the early outreach they have established in their plans to do more. So here it is, in a sense, a more conventional model, in the sense that it is a national company that, with the right kind of developmental ambitions that go a bit further than the average company, they are willing to invest in the chores and well, and sort of start to learn how to operate there. So also here, M4C's role has been modest, have been introducing them to the right kind of more established, more knowledgeable retailers, having helped them sort of connect to the more dynamic, sort of less risky farmers, so to speak, but beyond that, they are driving this on their own accord. But of course, more is needed. So the next example, I think, is a little bit less mainstream and sort of takes us a bit more into what it means to facilitate change into the chores. What you see on the left side of your screen is a portable storage facility. It may not look particularly portable yet if you look at it first value, but this thing can be broken down and moved around if there's high water. And secondly, it has been built in such a manner that it also, I think the cooling facilities are at the roof, so that it can't be damaged by water very quickly. Yeah, I think those are the two main features. Now, so this is not something, a bit of mainstream technology that someone in the Bangladeshi capital has developed and then from this rolled out all over Bangladesh. This has to be sort of almost locally developed to meet local circumstances. So in this case, it was the Center for Development and Research of the Chores. You have heard the name before, CDRC, who developed this initial model. driven by the fact that they saw a need for this in the chores. They know the chores very well. They have identified operators for the chores, but we're also at the same time had worked with M4C to turn a bit of technology into a business model by helping think through the notion, well, warehousing is one, having a physical warehouse is useful, but if you combine a warehouse with access to credit, once you put things in the warehouse, that creates real added value for farmers because they can get access to cash quicker, right? They don't need to wait until things have been sold, or definitely don't need to sell things when prices are lowest, when everyone tries to sell. So the more they can store things and wait a little bit until the market prices pick up again, they get more value from their crops, and that, of course, then can be used again to pay for the right kind of inputs and earn more money. So this model has been put into place, and also has various good effects for farmers. It's not only the credit, it's also safe storage, and better prices because they don't need to sell at when prices are lowest. So this is not driven by any kind of national actor. This is really local innovation that had to sort of turn into a business model. There's one small correction on this slide. We were fact checking this. Right now, I think plans to link up with sort of microfinance institutions, but the initial sort of credit comes from CDRC itself. All right, so national actors investing in the chores with the help of M4C, local actors sort of designing, developing new types of businesses in support with M4C. Why is this relevant? Well, the chores need it, but what this slide also shows is that the kind of work that's been done has been work in a relatively small area, has demonstrated that chores can really benefit from this kind of approach. But the chores in Bangladesh are much bigger than the area currently covered. So you need essentially, based on this learning, you need a kind of an ongoing process to bring this kind of investment and innovation to other chores. So after M4C, we need something more. And hence the question of institutionalization comes. So what do you need? If we spoke to the private sector for our knowledge, sort of our lessons learned exercise. We spoke to the public sector. We spoke to CDRC. We spoke to M4C, of course. And you heard me say this already maybe a couple of times. One thing that really is needed is no one knows the chores and is apprehensive about traveling to the chores and investing in the chores. So you need, at a minimum, someone who really knows chores literally like their pocket. So you need a bit of a champion there. What you also need is innovation that really is appropriate for the chores, like that portable storage facility that we just saw now. So that you also strengthen that sort of last mile business activity. The more you get that last mile into place, national and regional companies become more interested in investing in the chores, right? They have local counterparts to connect to. But you also need the coordination between private investment and public investment, because if you want to invest, but that mooring station isn't there, you can't travel easily, then there's still a gap. So you need that kind of coordination. You need to have facilitation also with public organizations so that they understand what their relevant role should be in the chores. And, sort of this is all informed by having adequate research on the chores and doing advocacy for the chores. So these are the kind of things that need to be built in, need to be permanently in place to drive ongoing development in the chores. And so this, as you have seen probably from even in this slide, this is clearly commercial, private angle to this, but there's also a public angle to that. And essentially what M4C has sought to institutionalize is an organization that can sort of speak to both these angles. And that has become the Center for Development and Research in the Chores, in short, CDRC. So I guess the final things I need to say about sort of how did they take this organization on this journey to take on this role. The starting point of CDRC is a small research for development center with a strong understanding of the chores. So on the one hand, a very suitable actor to work with because they know the chores better than probably anyone else in Bangladesh. At the same time, its traditional sort of mandate is research for development, right? Which means there's a lot of research activities, trying to adapt technology to make it work in a certain context, but that doesn't necessarily sort of leads to or is informed by a sort of a more comprehensive system perspective. What we mean by that is sort of this more comprehensive analysis of what are the kind of technological and commercial gaps that need to be addressed. What are the actors who are best suited to address those gaps, long-term, commercially, sustainably at least, and how to facilitate them to enable them to step into roles they're currently not doing. And so what a CDRC had to adapt is that sort of perspective, and with that, also an organizational model, vision, mission, but also the right kind of people and a funding structure that would allow them to play that role. And essentially what M4C has been doing, they have been interacting with CDRC over a long period of time, but the role, the relative importance of CDRC increased in time. So they essentially did is they literally workshop with them the kind of, if you want to move from this to that, so how should your organization look like? How should it be functioning? So literally your vision, your annual planning, your org chart, lots of sort of things that inform how a day-to-day organization works on a day-to-day basis. But also take them along in this process of how to conduct a system analysis so that CDRC right now is able to do that on their own. So in other words, they can go to a new chore that people haven't been worked in before and do a kind of a system diagnostic. So what do we need essentially? They are able, as we saw in that sort of example from the portable storage facilities, to merge that sort of traditional strength and sort of appropriate technology, but think through more what are the kind of business models that you need to bring that technology to life and identify suitable owners for that. They are able to work with local, but also larger national companies in terms of public-private partnerships in order to become real facilitators. And over time, also investment has been done to essentially provide CLC with more revolving funds through which they offer loans in various forms, and the revenue from those loans becomes, the beginnings of a sustainable model that sort of they can sort of fund more of their own activity without being less dependent on external funding. At the same time, the Rural Development Academy, under which CDRC operates, which is an old, very respected, established institution in Bangladesh, they have also agreed to work with CDRC to turn into a center of excellence as a means to attract more external financing longer term. So that is the engine that should drive this into the future. And this is then the picture that emerges. I'm not sure I should take you through the whole picture in detail. Hope you can read it. But what it means is you have a spider in the web in terms of keeping the chores on the map. The center of all of this is doing research on the chores, so really being able to communicate what the chores are, their potential, what is needed. And with that message, work on this last mile investments to get local business activity going. Build on that by facilitating national investments, build on that by sort of collaborating with public institutions, and using the results from that also again to keep on communicating and advocating for the church at large in sort of various fora that need to hear about that. So that's a very big central role that CDRC has been entrusted to play. Now, where does it leave us after 12 years? Well, I guess more programs will sort of face the situation. You have done a good job. You have achieved great results, but the job isn't done. Sort of this notion of institutionalization anchoring is critical to take your lessons forward. I guess more often than not, and definitely the case in Bangladesh, the long-term brokerage or facilitation role seem to be more should be taken forward by actually a public institution, which needs to be able to work then with the public and the private sector. It's not something that the private sector can do on their own, far from. At the same time, it's not something the public sector can do on their own. So you need to have a person who can speak to both sides. And if you can get that mechanism in place, then maybe you have something that can drive changes in forward. The impacts I haven't mentioned already, so I won't dwell on those. But a lot of investment has gone to farmers. A lot of people haven't reached. And I think increasingly it's also important that the government of Bangladesh has been offered continuous support to the CDRC and has committed to do so in the future. All right, we'll leave it here.
Thank you, Harold. I'll thank all of you. Great. Let's rush on to some questions. Please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box. We've got a few already, but before we start answering them, I wanted to bring in another voice. So we have somebody who was very involved in this program, Mohammed Abdul Awal, and we're just going to bring him in so that he can also help us answer some of these questions as they come up. Maybe, Awal, you could answer the first question, a quick question, perhaps, from Dick Tinsley about the impact on prices of the remoteness of the chars. How does that remoteness affect the cost of inputs and the prices received for outputs compared to non-char areas? Are you able to answer that one, Awal? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't sound like we can hear Awal. Perhaps,
Okay.
Can we hear you?
Now, can you hear me?
We can, thank you. Well done. Congratulations for getting in. Sorry not to sort that out earlier. Did you hear my question?
Yeah, I heard your question.
Sorry, he's just coming in as a panelist now.
Let's be a quick question. I want to. Oh, great. Oh, well.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of pricing, I would say the input and also the output was more competitive. I mean, in the terms of market pricing. So the char dwellers have more value from their products because of the increased pricing, because of their quality of products and volume that actually enter into the national market directly in some cases. And the input would take a bit higher prices because of the quality input that has been reached to the char areas. So in terms of pricing, I would say it was more competitive compared with the farmers, producers in mainland and also in the char.
Okay, but just to give a quick example, I mean, if I buy a bag of fertilizer on a chore,
okay,
is
let's
how
say
much more expensive? Is it 50% more expensive than on the mainland, or double? Or?
No, it's basically the price that has been a bit lower is basically the transportation cost because of the remoteness and others. But comparing the benchmark price of the char, it was 2 times higher than it was initial there.
Yeah.
And if
also,
we
I imagine it depends a lot on the distance. I mean, some chores are quite close to the mainland, and others are really like several hours boat journey. So,
but in terms of profiting, if we compare the earlier and after the intervention, it was 4 times higher the profit than the benchmark.
Okay. Thank you, Awal. So maybe somebody, so Asif has asked 4 questions actually, and they're all interesting, but let me zoom in on the third one, which Asif, which is what role, since it relates to what you were talking about, Harold, and the CDRC, what role do customary or local governance structures play in sustaining these systems, and how do you ensure their long-term engagement?
Indeed, good question. Yes, very relevant. I think we gave examples. It is very important that sort of that last mile is being put in place, and as we discussed, this last mile includes both public actors doing investments as well as private actors doing investments, and those investments need to be customized to be functional in a chore environment. The engagement, this is I think where CDRC really comes in, because also after people having maybe learned to work in the chores over the last 2 decades, people still would refer to the fact they derived a lot of comfort, for lack of a better word, in terms of being able to collaborate with someone such as a CDRC who knew where to go, what to do, whom to speak to, point them towards these are the kind of needs that need to be addressed. And that's essentially, whether it's public sector or private sector, people will speak in quite similar terms about that. So this notion of someone laying for them bare what is necessary was quite important. So that's also must be an ongoing role that CDRC should play.
Thank you. Well, there's another question from Asif here, which is one that interests me at least. How did M4C address the power dynamics between local traders, intermediaries, and small farmers to ensure that there's some kind of equity or fairness in access to markets?
Okay, I would say, I mean, it's more of the innovation in terms of the value chain development inside the chart. Let's say the TOS, which says the Trader Outboard Scheme, which is practically a informal group of farmers who have all rights to actually make their, creating bargaining power according to the market price. So it gives them more bargaining power to deal with the output market, also in the input market, because of their unity and cohesion among themselves. So this is one part. Another is, let's say, the power dynamics inside the chart. We follow a very, probably is a CSPM, the conflict sensitive management practices. From the very beginning, it was integrated with our intervention design and also the context analysis and averaging. So we were aware about if there is any this kind of dispute, we actually handle this very carefully and very technically. Does it give the answer of the question that asked?
I think it does. If it doesn't, then maybe I'll see if you can raise a second question and we can follow it up. Okay, so I'm going to keep going with these questions from Asif because they're very useful. The first one he asked is, what role do microfinance institutions or perhaps impact investors play in ensuring long-term financing for production in the chores?
Okay. Let's say it is not the traditional or conventional microfinancing. It was very tailored for the crop production, which we termed as seasonal loan products. So it's for a season for the crop production. So, it was been designed by the apex body of PKSF and implemented inside the chart by the MFIs. And that gives them more profitable business inside the chart. It was untapped. And this has been their own, trajectory for the development and sustainability. So I would say, the value addition from both sides is win-win. People get the access to the, finance that they require for the production purpose and for other technology adaptation purpose. And they actually get better price than the, earlier stages. So that works both ways from the grower perspective as well as the MFI perspective.
Sorry, thank you. But just just to pick up, so you mentioned that the product was developed by PKSF. Can you just say a little bit more about who that is? People don't know.
Portly Karma Sahayak Foundation is the apex body of the microfinancing.
Okay, so it's like a kind of networking.
Yeah, this is basically they finance more for the microfinancing to the NGOs. So microfinance get fund and also the product, loan product from PKSF in most cases.
Okay. So yes, in a way, that's part of the structural change then that you've got that business model of a kind of product that is designed for char farmers.
I wouldn't say that it was only for the char farmers.
Okay.
It was available in the mainland as well, but in case of char, it was a unique, innovation that this seasonal product actually work inside the char.
Right.
That was the kind of innovation.
Good. Okay. So maybe that takes us on to the final of 4 questions I see asked, which is what policies are needed to ensure that government support and regulatory stability for actors in remote environments?
Okay, I'm taking the question. Probably others can also
join in.
Particularly Zinia can help me. Let's
Sure.
say in terms of policy, government policy, I would say the stability depends on how much the government invests inside the chars for public service delivery. The public services are not actually, accessible inside the chars because of the remoteness and the poor network of the government, institutions. So it depends if the government put the emphasis on the public services, it would be complementary in terms of the economic development as well as the other services that will give them more resilience inside the job. That's what I would say.
Zinia, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, obviously, and happily. I would start with budget, because in the whole tenure of the 3rd phase of M4C project, what we were trying to do with government, particularly the planning ministry, who does the national budget. So, char specific budget allocation is very crucial. According to the question, we have seen that budgetary allocation specific for char or earmarked budget for char is very important. Government already saying that yes, we have the budget and we don't actually earmark this is for char or this is for the mainland. This is all for the development of the country. But yet we have identified that a char focused development plan from the government side as well as necessary budget allocation is a priority. And the M4C always with the government, since we have partnered with government, so we always pushed government, and a certain level of budgetary allocation process has been done before we exit, but we are sure that Chars Development Research Centre, CDRC, will carry forward this initiative and liaise with government. Second, I would say that coordination across the different departments. In Bangladesh, this is very true that we have lots of ministries, lots of departments under one ministry, but lack of coordination is very important. So, for example, if you go to the char with the public extension service delivery issues, one department will say, this is not our responsibility. Why not you talk to others? So it exactly happens for the disaster risk reduction, for the agriculture extension, for the Department of Livestock Services. So lack of coordination is also necessary. So from the policy level, if there is a certain coordination policy, focused for the char related development, so the departments or the agencies will be more mandated to go and deliver the service. So this is highest priority at this point. So we have seen, in short, that the budget and coordination are very important from the government level. Yeah.
Thank you, Zinia.
these are the addition to what I always said. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Let me turn to a question from Daniel Langford, who has been reading the report, which a link to the report is in the chat, by the way, and I really encourage you to read it if you haven't had a chance. But he has picked up on a reference to disruptive innovators, especially in the finance space, Awal, and the need to facilitate more entrepreneurship in those areas. The question is, what did this disruption look like? Who were the disruptors, and how did it play out? Were there winners and losers? And how did M4C approach the positive and the negative, the upside and the downside of that disruption?
Okay, if I get it correctly, I guess it indicates the natural calamities that happens on a regular basis. Let's say the flood, or sometimes something that disrupts the financial use, and also the supply chain, and also the demand side as well, in many cases. And to offset this, we actually help both farmers to cope for the cope-up mechanisms, and to support the service providers to actually adopt a mechanism so they can have some time to recover from such kind of disasters, and then probably they get back to them with the whole bunch of money they need to reverse. So I mean, it was more natural and organic way of both supply side and demand side is understanding. We didn't do that much actually to cope up with this. It was more business and business relationships.
Thank you. Well, look, we are running out of time, and before we go, I wanted to ask you a favor, just to fill in a quick form. That's a link is available in the chat. Just quickly let us know what you felt about this webinar, and any response, any feedback you would like to share. Let's just go back to the questions and see if there's only one last question we can deal with quickly. Dan Norell, you asked, how much investment has the private sector made in the chores without any kind of cost sharing by M4C? And what could MSD programs do to increase long-term investment without having to without doing cost sharing?
Okay, I mean, excluding the core.
Sorry, well, mate, could I just throw that question perhaps to Harald at the end?
Okay, Harold. Please.
No, but I think you should answer first, because I don't have the answer to that,
Okay.
in terms of investment by your partners post your support.
Okay, sorry. Well, go ahead.
But yeah, I can give you the figures. Let's say excluding the key, value of the business, only the operational cost that has been shared for entering into the char market and sustaining with more capacity, and actually delivering the services more efficiently. What we got actually CHF 1 million from the private sector investment, which we have been counted. Other than this is only the partners that we work with, but there are 53 non-partners who also invested, but this is not measured by us because of we don't report that actually. And other than these, there are lots of small businesses, let's say the retailers, the traders, small traders, and new entrepreneurs who is emerging and also creating in the capital and investing in the char markets. So that is not measured actually because of it was not our somehow reporting obligations, but we actually covered the direct cost that has been incurred by the private sector to operate and continue inside the chars.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I mean, we have the conversation has just got going when we have run out of time. I can see there's a few questions from Dick Tinsley about the nature of nature of society on the chores, really, in a way, which I think are very interesting. I'm sure some of you would have good references for explaining how it works. It's quite complicated, isn't it? But we haven't got time to answer those questions live now, unfortunately. So I'm just going to wrap things up for now. And if you have any questions, please, if you want to add them into the feedback form, we will try and respond to or give you links to people who can respond to those questions in the feedback form. But otherwise, I'm just going to say a really big thank you to everybody, to Harald, but also most important, of course, to Zinia, Helal, and Awal for all your contributions. And may you have a peaceful evening in Bangladesh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.